Hello and welcome to Better Rugby on Forever Sport and some interesting news, a bit of a reaction. Last night was the official World Rugby Awards and it's caused quite a bit of a stir, hasn't it? With the lack of recognition for a Springboks side that have gone back to back, that are the number one ranked side in the world, and yet did not really walk away with too much last night, apart from having to go on stage and show off the William Webb Ellis Trophy. So the entire squad was there because we are the number one side in the world and are the world champions. And that's the main thing, isn't it? That's why a lot of Springbok fans aren't maybe overly upset with last night, but it's an interesting conversation to have, with regards to good players versus good teams, good, teams that perform consistently versus teams that pitch up when it counts, I suppose, is probably the right way of putting it. Because, I think, the Boks maybe haven't been the most consistent team over the last couple of years, but have always rocked up when it really matters. Whenever they've focused on something, they've always done the job. British and Irish Lions say 2021, World Cup 2023. So we're going to look at the winners and as well as the dream team, which is probably the one that's upset people the most, and just discuss it a little bit. Before we do that, please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Right, let's go through some of the awards, shall we? We'll start with some of I wouldn't say the minor awards, but the non-awards I want to speak about a bit much. First of all, the World Rugby Hall of Fame inductees. We did a video about this earlier. They were Dan Carter, Terry Dusatois, George Smith, Jean-Martin Hernandez, and Brian Habana. The Rugby Players Men's Try of the Year was won by Juan van der Merwe for that brilliant solo effort against England. The International Rugby Players Special Merit Award was won by John Smith. So that was a bit of recognition there. The Vernon Pugh Award for Distinguished Service went to George Nataradze from Georgia. The Rugby for All Award went to the SOS Kit Aid. The World Rugby Referee Award went to David McHugh. Tyler Nathan Wrong walked away with the Women's Sevens Player of the Year. Rodrigo Isco walked away with the Argentina. From Argentina walked away with the Sevens Player of the Year. Right, let's get into some of the big ones, shall we? And very, very controversial, I think is probably the right word. Let's start with the World Coach of the Year. Let's start with the World Breakthrough Player of the Year, which was Mark Tilley, which I don't think there can be too argument about that. He was absolutely phenomenal this year. Could almost, an argument for him to be World Player of the Year, really, with some of the performances he put in. Was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. It often does go to a wing, and I always sort of feel like it sort of lends itself towards it because you come on new to the scene, you end up scoring a lot of tries, for example, it sort of lends itself to being sort of getting that sort of instant sort of recognition. Let's talk a little about the Coach of the Year. It was given to Andy Farrell from Ireland. Now, this is an interesting one because the more you look at it, the more you feel that Jacques Nielba has been hard done by here. Now, let's look at it. So, Andy Farrell and Ireland have been the number one side in the world for the past couple of years, and there's no doubt that they are. I think my understanding of the awards is that this starts from November 2022 last year up until now, for example, which is why somebody like a Martin Ebach, for example, can be nominated because he made his debut last year in 2022. As was nominated for Breakthrough Player of the Year. So, Ireland didn't lose a game last in November. Didn't lose a game in the Grand Slam, lost one game in the World Cup. So, if you look at a pure numbers game, Ireland have had the better last 12 months. Jacques Nienaber was at the head, or the realm, as the head coach of the single greatest Rugby World Cup campaign we've ever seen. That is a fact. To go basically have to beat 5 out of the top 6 teams, the entire top 6. They had to beat the entire top 6 best teams in the world to win this World Cup, which is what they did. It is phenomenal. It is one of the greatest coaching feats of all time. And for that not to be recognized as the Coach of the Year, for me, is very poor. I think, as I said, the more you look at just how tough this Bok victory was. And I'll do a video about the reaction to it, because a lot of people, once again, are taking aim at the Boks, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. They're a side that played to win and adapted to win and got the job done. You cannot argue the results. Jacques Nienaber is a world champion as a coach. And I do think that, Andy Farrell, yes, one loss doesn't make him a bad coach. But Ireland had the team to go and win the World Cup, and they stumbled at the first hurdle, really. And that needs to be talked about a little bit. Whereas Jacques Nienaber didn't. They beat the hosts, which they weren't odds-on favourites. They beat New Zealand, which they weren't odds-on favourites. They weren't odds-on favourites to win the World Cup. So they continued to sort of rise above the expectations, inverted commas, and go on to do great things. RDCB is someone as well. People are sort of talking a little bit about. It could be a controversial one. I'm a bit surprised by this. I think usually, generally, if you win the World Cup, you often get World Player of the Year. It's kind of sort of often goes hand in hand. Similarly with the coaches, really. So it's a bit surprising not to see Evan Etzebeth walking away. And I think it's just sad that a phenomenal player, one of the all-time greats, if not one of the greatest Springbok players of all time, Evan Etzebeth, probably won't ever win a Player of the Year. Whereas I do think he's now in the conversation for one of the best locks ever. He's just won it all. He's been around for how many years? I think he's going to end up as the most capped Springbok of all time, and he's one of the great players. But the thing that's really sort of upset people the most is this: the men's dream team of the year, which featured just one solitary Springbok player, which featured 5 French players and 5 Irish players. 10 players out of the 15 coming from those 2 teams who went out in the quarterfinals. Up after that, it was 4 New Zealand players and then just 1 South African player. So, and this is the one thing that's got everybody upset. To sit there saying, how can the world champions have 1 player in a team where the runners-up have 4 and where 2 teams that didn't get past the quarterfinals of the World Cup have 5 each? And I think that there is a lot of merit in a lot of the debate, for example. The Boks were great as a squad. We all know that's what makes them such a special team and a squad, is that their depth is so good. It's not a team of individual stars. It's a team of, it's a squad of great players and players that buy into a system. There are decisions here which I think are bad. I think Ty Furlong has been awful for a while. I think he's a world-class tight end, but I think that he's not been playing at his best, especially this year. And I'm not convinced he deserves that. I think Dan Cole, for example, is a better scrummager. You sit there thinking, what does Francois Herbert do wrong? Because he isn't out there ball carrying a lot in the loose, for example. But in terms of scrummaging, class, doing the hard yards, I think there's very few players who are better than him. And I think he deserves to be recognised for that. Dan Shear versus Malcolm Marx. You think about Malcolm Marx last year and at the end of your tour, because this plays into it, and he was phenomenal. You think about how good he was in the Rugby Championship, and he was phenomenal. Yes, he then missed the bulk of the World Cup, but it's not like Dan Sheehan played much. Dan Sheehan, I think, played 2 games in the World Cup, if that, or 1 game, or 2.5 games. So, yeah, I mean, again, I think there could be a big debate for Malcolm Marx over Dan Sheehan. Silverby, I'm not mad at that. I think that he's a brilliant player. I think if you look at loose heads, I think Andrew Porter gets away with a lot. I think Stephen Kitsoff didn't have the. Well, I think Oxford had the better World Cup, for example. I think Stephen Kitsoff's been probably even better over the last 12 months. So I've got no issue with the Silverby conversation. Even Etzebeth had to be there. Scott Barrett, based on his Rugby Championship, I think no arguments there whatsoever. There is an argument there, I think, now for, based on this year, I think there's an argument for Arthur Snyman. I think he's been absolutely phenomenal off the bench. I think Franco Moster continues to be the most underrated player in World Rugby. And the more you look at him, the more you sit there going, well, bar 1 or 2 games where he's getting up to speed in sort of July, August, he had a fantastic World Cup. He had a brilliant end-of-year tour last year when he was available and playing across there. And just because he's not flashy and because he's not a big presence and he's not a big personality, I just don't think he gets the recognition. If you look at the loose trio, a lot of people are very upset at there's no South Africans. I can understand, RCB is always going to be there. I think there is a conversation to be had about Pieter-Steph du Toit. I think he has been looking very good this year. I think he's been looking much, much closer. And then obviously that performance in the final was one of the best performances of all time from an individual. Apart from that, Flowerhouse, for example, I think you're looking at I think maybe Romain Intermax, the only other player that really would have, or Johnny Sexton, you could have had a conversation about over Richie Mo'unga. I do think that's a bit of recency bias. In the centres, tell you what, based on the World Cup, there could have been an argument for JC Creel, but I think Gary Greenway has been fantastic. I think Gary Fleetwood had a great Six Nations. I wouldn't have put Rico on in there, for example. I don't think there's too many other players there. In the back row, I'll tell you what, I would like to have a serious conversation about David Willemse. I think he's had a phenomenal tournament. I think he had a better tournament than Thomas Ramos did. Thomas Ramos is phenomenal with the boot. I think that's probably one of the big things that also really sort of factors. And he is absolutely sensational. Borderline, probably the world's best right now, from what I saw. I do think Daniel Willemse, though, has an argument to be made. I think he is. I think he wouldn't look out of place in this tournament at all. Damien Penno and Will Jordan obviously scoring tries for fun. Currie Lawrence in the last year is still scoring more than a try a game, so he could have definitely been in there with a bit of a shot. But I think Will Jordan with those 8 tries, equaling the world record, I think was always going to be in there. Dane Penner was phenomenal in the Six Nations and very good in the World Cup as well. So that's where there's a big sort of talk about well, why don't the Springboks get the recognition? And I think there's a certain amount of we were never going to have more than that if we didn't make the final and stuff like that. Whereas I think that there is a certain amount of privilege in a France getting 5 players when they didn't win the World Cup, they didn't win the Six Nations, for example. So are they? They haven't been the number 1 team in the world over the last year, and yet they've got 5 players in there. So I think there's an argument to be made for that. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Is there a vendetta out against the Springboks by World Rugby? And do you agree? What change would you make to this dream team of the year? I reckon Kwagga Smith could almost have a bit of a shot. I mean, he must be one of the best impact players of all time. Genuinely, looking at it, he was phenomenal in the World Cup. I put him in a World Cup team in the tournament. We might actually put him in a World Cup team in the tournament. That will come out in the next couple of days, by the way. But yeah, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Please do smash like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven, and I'll chat to you soon.